Before we begin tonight's terrifying true story, I want you to think about your daily routine. The coffee shop you visit every morning, the route you take to work, the time you leave your house. These predictable patterns make us feel secure and in control, but they also make us incredibly vulnerable to those who might be watching and waiting. Tonight's story comes from someone whose morning routine in Detroit nearly cost him his life. It's a reminder that in certain neighborhoods, being predictable can be the most dangerous thing you can do. As I tell you this story, think about your own routines and consider how easily someone could track your movements if they really wanted to. My name is Carlos, and for the past 3 years, I've been working the early shift at a Ford parts warehouse on the east side of Detroit. It's not glamorous work, but it pays decent money and keeps me close to the neighborhood where I grew up. My routine was simple and reliable. Wake up at 5:30 a.m., shower and get dressed, then stop at Hassan's corner store on East Warren for black coffee and a newspaper before heading to work at 7 sharp. Hassan's place wasn't much to look at from the outside, just a small brick building wedged between a laundromat and a vacant lot, with security bars on the windows and a hand-painted sign that read, "Warren Market, beer, wine, groceries." But Hassan kept good coffee, his prices were fair, and over the years, we'd developed the kind of casual friendship that comes from seeing someone nearly every day for 3 years straight. Hassan was a Lebanese immigrant in his 50s who'd been running corner stores in Detroit for over 20 years. He was always friendly but cautious, the way you have to be when you're operating a small business in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. He knew all the regular customers by name, kept track of credit for families going through tough times, and had an intuitive sense of when trouble might be brewing on the street. The first sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning in late October. I walked into the store at my usual time, 6:45 a.m., expecting our normal exchange of pleasantries while Hassan rang up my coffee and Detroit Free Press. Instead, he looked nervous, constantly glancing toward the front windows while he handled my transaction. When he handed me my change, he leaned forward slightly and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Carlos, you've been coming here same time every day for long time, yes?" His accent was more pronounced than usual, which typically happened when he was stressed or concerned about something. "Yeah, for about 3 years now. Same routine, same time," I replied, not sure where the conversation was heading. Hassan looked around the store as if checking for eavesdroppers, even though we were the only 2 people there. "Maybe you should change your routine. Come different time. Morning not so good anymore." The suggestion caught me completely off guard. "What do you mean? Is there some kind of problem in the neighborhood?" Instead of answering directly, Hassan just shook his head and repeated, "Different time is better. Trust me on this." But something in his expression suggested there was much more to the story than he was willing to share. I left the store that morning feeling unsettled, but not particularly alarmed. Detroit neighborhoods go through cycles, and sometimes local business owners pick up on trouble before it becomes obvious to everyone else. I figured maybe there had been some break-ins or Hassan had gotten word about increased gang activity in the area. It didn't seem like anything that would directly affect my morning coffee routine, but Hassan's behavior over the next few days became increasingly strange. He started watching the front windows obsessively, installed what looked like 2 additional security cameras, and began keeping a baseball bat within easy reach behind the counter. Most troubling, he seemed genuinely frightened whenever I showed up at my usual time, constantly urging me to come back later or try afternoon instead. It was on Friday of that same week that Hassan finally explained what was happening, and his explanation chilled me to the bone. I'd walked into the store to find him installing yet another security camera, this one positioned to monitor the back alley behind the building. When I asked about all the new security measures, he motioned for me to come closer to the counter. "Carlos, you remember I tell you not to come in morning anymore," he said quietly. "Is not about neighborhood trouble, is about you specifically." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean, about me specifically?" Hassan looked toward the front windows again, then back at me. "Black car, 4-door sedan. Been parking across street every morning for 2 weeks. Different spot each day, but always there when you come. Always leave after you leave. They watching your routine, your timing. They know when you come, how long you stay, which direction you go after." I felt my stomach drop. Who's they? And why would anyone be watching me? "I don't know who, but I know why," Hassan replied grimly. "You predictable. Same time, same routine, same route every day for 3 years. Make you easy target for whatever they planning. The realization that I'd been under surveillance without knowing it was terrifying, but what Hassan told me next was even worse. He explained that over the past 6 months, he'd noticed the same pattern with other regular customers, people who came in at the same time every day, following predictable routines, would eventually attract the attention of the black car or similar vehicles. Then, after a few weeks of apparent surveillance, those customers would simply stop coming to the store. At first, I think maybe they move away, or change job, or find different store, Hassan said, but is too many people, too short time. And families come asking about them. Wife looking for husband who never come home from work, mother asking about son who disappear walking to bus stop. These people, they don't just change routine. Something happened to them. The implications of what Hassan was telling me were staggering. If he was right, then someone or some group was systematically targeting people with predictable daily routines, studying their movements, then making them disappear. The corner store wasn't just a business, it was a hunting ground where predators could observe and select their victims. Hassan reached under the counter and pulled out a small notebook where he'd been keeping records. I write down license plates, times, descriptions. Police not interested when I try to report, but I keep track anyway. He showed me pages of detailed observations, different vehicles, always dark-colored sedans or SUVs with various license plates, but similar patterns of behavior. They would park in different locations around the store, always with clear sight lines to the entrance, and always during specific time windows when regular customers were most likely to appear. The pattern is always same, Hassan continued. They watch someone for 2 to 3 weeks, learn the schedule, learn the route. Then one day, person just disappear. Car stop coming, customer never seen again. I asked Hassan why he hadn't closed the store or contacted federal authorities if he suspected organized criminal activity. His answer revealed the impossible position he was in as a small business owner in a neighborhood where cooperation with law enforcement was complicated by years of mutual distrust and limited resources. I have family, Carlos. I have mortgage, employees, community depending on this store. I cannot just close because of suspicion, and police, they have bigger problems than missing people from this neighborhood. But I can try to protect my customers, warn them, help them change routine. That's when Hassan revealed his plan. He'd been quietly warning his most vulnerable regular customers, suggesting they alter their schedules or use the back entrance that opened into the alley behind the store. The back entrance was less visible from the street and accessed through a narrow alley that would make surveillance more difficult. You use back door from now on, Hassan insisted. I give you key, you come through alley. Front door too dangerous for people with regular schedule. I spent the weekend thinking about Hassan's warnings and trying to decide how seriously to take them. Part of me wondered if he was being paranoid, seeing patterns where none existed, or perhaps dealing with stress-related anxiety about running a business in a challenging neighborhood. But another part of me couldn't ignore the genuine fear in his voice or the detailed records he'd been keeping. On Monday morning, I decided to test Hassan's claims by driving past the store at my usual time, instead of stopping. Sure enough, there was a black sedan parked across the street, with tinted windows and a clear view of the store entrance. I couldn't see inside the vehicle, but it was positioned exactly as Hassan had described, and when I circled the block and drove past again 10 minutes later, it was gone. The confirmation that I was indeed being watched sent a wave of panic through me that lasted for days. Every time I left my apartment, I found myself checking for the same black car or similar vehicles. Every routine activity, from grocery shopping to visiting the laundromat, suddenly felt dangerous and exposed. The realization that someone had been studying my movements for weeks without my knowledge was profoundly unsettling. I started using Hassan's back entrance, parking in the alley and entering through the rear door that he'd given me a key for. The routine felt awkward and paranoid at first, but Hassan's relief was obvious every time I avoided the front entrance during morning hours. He'd also begun sharing information with me about other customers he was protecting in similar ways, and the scope of the surveillance operation was much larger than I'd initially understood. According to Hassan's observations, there were multiple teams conducting surveillance on different customers at different times throughout the day. The morning shift seemed to focus on people heading to work, while afternoon and evening teams targeted different demographics. The level of organization suggested this wasn't random crime, but something much more systematic and sophisticated. 3 weeks after I'd started using the back entrance, Hassan told me something that confirmed our worst fears about what was happening to the people who disappeared. His cousin, who worked at Detroit Receiving Hospital, had mentioned an unusual pattern of unidentified bodies being brought in over the past year. All were people from the same general area of the city. All had been found in remote locations, and none had any identification or family members who came forward to claim them. My cousins say these people, they look like they've been taken somewhere, held for time, then killed, Hassan explained quietly. Not robbery, not gang violence, something more organized, more planned. The possibility that the surveillance operation was connected to kidnapping and murder made my daily trips to the store feel even more dangerous. But Hassan had become more than just a store owner. He was actively working to protect his community from what appeared to be organized predators, using his business as a hunting ground. Hassan had started varying his own schedule, sometimes closing the store during peak surveillance hours and reopening later. He'd installed motion-activated lighting in the alley, positioned mirrors to provide better visibility of the street from inside the store, and begun coordinating with other neighborhood business owners to share information about suspicious vehicles and activities. The most chilling incident occurred on a Thursday morning when I arrived at the back entrance to find Hassan's nephew waiting for me instead. Hassan had been hospitalized the night before after what police were calling a random assault as he closed the store. But according to his nephew, Hassan believed the attack was retaliation for interfering with the surveillance operation. Uncle Hassan say they're getting angry because customers changing routine, using back door, not following predictable schedule, his nephew explained. He think they know he warning people. Hassan spent 4 days in the hospital with a concussion and broken ribs. When he returned to work, he was obviously frightened, but more determined than ever to protect his customers. He'd hired private security for evening hours and installed additional cameras that fed to a monitoring service rather than just recording locally. But the most significant development came when Hassan's detailed records finally caught the attention of a Detroit police detective who specialized in missing persons cases. Hassan's documentation of vehicle descriptions, license plates, and timing patterns provided the first solid leads in what turned out to be a much larger investigation into human trafficking operations in the Detroit metropolitan area. The detective, whose name I won't share for obvious reasons, confirmed that Hassan's observations matched reports from other parts of the city where people with predictable routines had been disappearing. The corner store surveillance was part of a larger operation that used various public businesses as observation points for selecting victims who would be unlikely to be immediately missed. Within 2 months of the police investigation beginning, several arrests were made, and the surveillance activities around Hassan's store stopped completely. The black sedan and similar vehicles no longer appeared during morning hours, and the atmosphere in the neighborhood gradually returned to something approaching normal. But the experience fundamentally changed how I think about daily routines and personal security in urban environments. The realization that predictable behavior can make you a target for organized criminals was a wake-up call about vulnerabilities I'd never considered. Hassan's willingness to risk his own safety to protect his customers demonstrated the kind of community solidarity that exists in neighborhoods where people have to look out for each other. Hassan still runs his corner store, but with significantly enhanced security measures and a much more sophisticated understanding of the criminal activities that can target small businesses and their customers. He continues to warn customers about the dangers of predictable routines and maintains the back entrance for people who prefer to avoid street-level visibility during vulnerable hours. The investigation revealed that the trafficking operation had been responsible for dozens of disappearances across Detroit, targeting people whose absence wouldn't immediately trigger extensive searches by family or employers. The methodical surveillance of routine activities was part of a selection process designed to identify the most vulnerable potential victims. This experience taught me that in certain urban environments, the things we do to create structure and stability in our lives can also make us targets for those who prey on predictability. Hassan's vigilance and community awareness probably saved my life and the lives of several other people who were being watched and studied by predators who had turned a simple corner store into their hunting ground.